The Hokage are some of the strongest and most legendary shinobi in the history of Naruto. Each of them possess fantastic abilities, ranging from instantaneous teleportation to literal Bijou chakra avatars. Each of the Hokage have stellar feats on their resumes, instances where they were able to display their power in a way that makes them shine. But likewise, each of them have failures as well. But what would happen if one of the biggest failures to protect Konoha was rewritten with a different Hokage at the helm? In other words, today we'll be exploring and answering the question, what would happen if we put each of the Hokage up against the Pain Assault? But I won't be doing this by myself. No, today I have a very special guest. He's easily on my Mount Rushmore of Naruto content creators and ascending quickly. Today we're joined by none other than TG, the Thunder God himself. Welcome to the channel, man.
What's going on, guys? TG or Thunder God here. Thank you for having me. That was a good intro. I'm kind of like blown back. That was a really good intro.
Bro, I'm just excited to have you on here, bro. I know we had a lot of good conversations, and I look forward to making some incredible stuff, man.
Now we got a great video for you guys today. So why don't you kick us off, man?
Well, for the structure of the video, we're going to try to keep it pretty simple. Basically, we're going to drop each of the Hokage into the place of Tsunade during the Pain Assault. So we'll be giving each of the Hokage a grade for how they perform, from A to F based on how they protect the villages and or take down Pain. So to kick us off, we've got a pretty easy one, Hashirama Senju. I think TG and I are on the same page here. I think Hashirama literally takes down Pain almost immediately. There's nothing Pain could really do to even damage him. So how do you see this going down?
I mean, it would just be like Pain would pull up on the Leaf Village, he'd split into two squads. Hashirama would see this. He made like 12 wood clones and just proceed to solo Pain. It really wouldn't be an issue for like there's no wood style that needs to be talked about. There's no scaling that needs to be had. All of Hashirama's clones, like if you want like a minor example, Hashirama's clones could like restrain unstable Jubito. They might unironically just go and grab each path of Pain and put them in front of Hashirama. It's over, man. It's over.
Yeah, well, and I think like based on the way that he fights, there could still be some damage to parts of the village he's fighting in. But we touched on the possibility of him being able to erect a barrier to sort of contain that damage. So, worst case scenario, he pulls out like the wood golem or something and decimates like a neighborhood. But like, I also think that he'd be able to, use his wood clones to evacuate the citizens and protect them. So. Yeah. Due to that, I do think Hashirama can take down Pain and prevent excess damage. So I give him an A here.
Yeah, I think it's just he's probably one of the safest guys to have. Like he just has so much smart rail stuff. It's just pretty self-explanatory why he gets an A.
So that one was a pretty easy one. I think this next one is a little bit more difficult. You know what, TG, what do you think about Tobirama, how he fares in this situation?
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying this because Tobirama is interesting because unlike his brother, he doesn't really have access to like these large scale attacks. He's obviously not got like Bijou suppression and stuff like that, but he is similar in a lot of the good ways. Like he can make shadow clones, and it's implied he can make he developed the jutsu obviously, but it's implied he can make quite a bit, as when he's inside the barrier during the war, he's like, I can only make 2. This is like pathetic. So there is the potential he might take a similar approach to Hashirama and just spread out clones throughout the village to just go combat the passive Pain, which is pretty important because Tobirama's like, he's really strong. I know he's kind of like, one people are one way or the other, but he does have some really good feats in the war arc. He's able to keep pace in a group of EMS Sasuke, like more mastered QB Naruto, QB Minato. Like he's able to keep pace with these fighters and act strategies with them. Despite where you think he scales, like this level of strength is already pretty objectively above what Pain is. So this does put Tobirama in a good light. And the fact that he is going to be able to teleport around the village does make it so that he can kind of have his feet wet in multiple areas. What's your thought?
Yeah, man, I think that, his feats in the war arc alone put him in a completely different speed tier than Pain. So, like, you could make a legitimate argument that he just spreads clones across the village and just blitzes every single one of them. The biggest issues that I see here, though, are the chaotic Shinra Tensei, because I don't think he really has much of a counter for it.
Yeah.
And then maybe even the summons. Like, I like to think that Tobirama should have a counter for that. And, like, with the chameleon, if he can, which he should be able to sense that he's a good sensory ninja, but
Yeah.
he should be able to like cut it in half because like we saw that happen. Like he should be able to damage some of them, but I'm also not entirely sold on the fact that he could take down all of them, especially before there's a good amount of damage done to the village. Whereas like Hashirama can just use wood dragons to restrain them,
Yeah.
like so that's the biggest issues I see for him here. So how do you see him sort of taking down those summons or maybe dealing with the chaotic Shinra Tensei?
The main thing for the summons, because I agree, I don't think like necessarily, they don't have the craziest durability feats. It's like the chameleon gets sliced by Ma's, water, or I believe it's Marpa's water style, and then like even Edo Itachi can like throw some kunai in the eyes of like the summon and just knock it out. So I don't think it's
kunai
that,
level, bro.
Yeah, literally. So it's not that crazy. Some of them are more impressive though, like when Pain stacks like the replicating technique on the dog. Yes, it's a technique that causes it, which again might present an issue. The main thing I would see for Tobirama is he would more than likely probably try to teleport the summons outside the village and then come back in, kind of similar to how like he teleports to Kurama avatars in the war arc. You kind of do have to imply that Tobirama has a marking around the village, but considering he's Hokage, or if you kind of, I would say it's not out of character for him to do so. Like he can manually mark kunai, so I could see him like chucking a kunai like far away and then like running into the battlefield. But again, like it's not like he's gonna be able to do this or have as many prepped kunai as Minato, for example, who like mains like FTG, whereas it's more so like a supplement, and Tobirama's a wide range of jutsu. But do that, like he definitely could get rid of some of the summons, but in terms of like just instantly sending them all out, he's obviously not going to be able to do that. And even chaotic Shinra Tensei, I will be it, like it is a little out there character wise for Pain to do it. It kind of depends like what Tobirama says to him. Like he might just get Pain mad, kind of in a similar capacity like Tsunade. But if he does do that, I mean Tobirama just has nothing. Like what's he gonna do? Spit water at it? The best he can do is maybe teleport some people out, or maybe like if you want to get really edgy, like throw a kunai and like teleport Pain out. But again, like there's just nothing really he's gonna be able to do once this technique gets initiated. He kind of has to take down the diva path before he can, but if he doesn't, there's just no way for him to prevent any damage getting done to the village.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think because he has no answer for that specifically, and then also because like even though he could probably take down the animal summons, he would have a ton of trouble actually doing it quick enough to keep the village from being damaged pretty badly. So while I do think that Tobirama in the end should be able to take down Pain, I don't see a reason like why he wouldn't be able to. I see the damage to the village being pretty catastrophic. Now I know this is something we talked about before the call, and I know this is something that somebody is going to bring up at some point. What do you think about the tandem paper bombs?
Okay. So I know there's a couple ways to go about this. Off Edo Tensei Tobirama, he pretty much explicitly states the data book also supplements this, that this is specifically to be used with like Edo Tensei. So there's kind of two interpretations you have. You argue either Tobirama has like a stockpile ready of like fresh bodies to use for Edo Tensei that he just pulls up with in the village,
which would be mad weird.
That would be crazy. Or some people actually argue due to him having paper bomb manipulation, he has a form of like dust release that supplemented with the Edo Tensei that would allow him to use the technique just generally without the Edo Tensei. I personally don't go off this interpretation just because it's a little more out there than what's stated, but like it is out there if you want to use it. So I also think tin and paper bombs like would best be used if Tobirama did it with him teleporting any of the paths of Pain outside the village and then using it. He's not going to use it inside the village. Let's just stop right there. Like that's not indicative. Like it's so, even though like I think I don't even think it's very even necessary for this battle. I mean, it is something to do, but even then, like, it's not the type of jutsu you would just use in the village because it has a large scale, like, nuking effect. And, maybe he tells people to get away. Maybe it's a dry area, sure, but still, I just don't think it's as likely he uses it. I think he kind of has to teleport around to kind of get that technique off, or you kind of have to make some prep assumptions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the last thing that, I talked about this in my Hokage ranked video. It might be hilarious to see him, like if the village does get nuked by a chaotic Shinra Tensei, and if he's able to survive that, like there would be a bunch of dead bodies laying around.
Yeah.
So he could just like use the carcasses of the Hokage or the Konoha citizens as
my
reanimations.
God, that's
It's
crazy.
so dark, but like I mean, Tobirama has done some questionable stuff. So,
Yeah.
like how do you discover how to do the reanimation? Let's just think about that real quick. So, yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
wouldn't put it past him, but like at the same time, at that point, the village is devastated anyway. I think the last thing to touch on here would be like he might be able to sense Nagato from where he was hiding at, considering he's a great sensor ninja. So like
Yeah.
but I do think that even if he does, even if he goes out to where Nagato is at, uh, the village is still getting destroyed the entire time. So
Yeah.
like,
I mean,
yeah, any way you slice it, it's not good.
the biggest thing I would probably say, like, if you wanted to be super, I don't even want to say super generous because like this is that crazy for Tobirama, but you could say like, because Bringer of Darkness is something to note. The fact that he has that technique. Now, the debate with that technique is that he uses it in the anime, and Hashirama does it in the manga. But it's weird because Hashirama's data book says that he has Yang release, whereas Tobirama has Yin release, which is like Shadow, which is what the technique should abide by. So he should be able to do it. Maybe this might be more edgy, but you could say like he makes Shadow clones, and they all tend to they all use the Bringer of Darkness on the Rinnegan to kind of like make Nagato completely blind and just see black, which would be crazy. But so there's always options for Tobirama, but I think the bottom line is that Pain himself isn't really too much of an issue for Tobirama, more often than not from like a stat perspective. It's just kind of like, okay, what's the best approach Tobirama could take to mitigate the damage, whereas he it's a little tougher for him in this it's kind of like a question of like how quickly can he just dart around and take down Pain while the village is kind of getting scrapped around.
Yeah, and how quickly can he figure out the abilities of Pain as well?
Yeah,
you know, like because even if he takes down the Diva Path quickly, like who's to say that he doesn't get revived? You know what I mean? So, I think for me, I don't see a way that this, unless you just want to assume that like he just blitzes all of them off rip, which would be really tough because they're spread out.
Yeah.
Then to me, like the village is going to suffer some sort of catastrophic damage. So, what letter grade do you give Tobirama here?
It's tough, man. It's tough because it's like it is somewhat dependent on like how you view the character and his abilities. You know what I'm saying? So I actually think there could be a range. I would say like from B to D as a range, because and that's like taking in like how you interpret Tobirama and his abilities, because some people, you know, scale the character quite a bit higher, some people scale him a bit lower. So I'll say that's fair. And you know, depending on how quickly you think he gets the job done, maybe it's just a clean B. There's some, you know, some damage to the village. Or if you think, you know, he's like sub Tsunade level, then, you know, D tier and he can't beat Pain. You know, like it really does depend. So, you know, I would probably say a range is more appropriate for Tobirama. I'm gonna say B to D range, just for like opening that discussion.
Yeah, well, because I agree with you, because I do think that there's a possibility for him to come out and like take them down before the animal summons or the chaotic Shinra Tensei become an issue. But like if either of them do, I just don't see a way he can mitigate the damage enough to like you know, get him any higher than D. So I think that's good. So anywhere between a B and a D. So next up we have the third Hokage, Hiruzen, and we're gonna split this up into two different sort of forms here. The first one is going to be Old Man Hiruzen, and then the next one will be a hypothetical Prime Hiruzen. So as far as Hiruzen goes, I think the Old Man version of him, it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, while he should scale above, you know, the Sannin, or at least like to the Sannin based on his fight with Orochimaru. We saw, well, depending on how you if you view it to be canon or not, we did see in a particular medium like Orochimaru versus Pain, and it didn't go well. So, but like I don't think anybody's really arguing that Orochimaru could stand a chance against Pain. So since Hiruzen scales right around that version of Orochimaru, I don't see him being able to really do anything here. What about you, TG?
I mean, look, I'm of the opinion Sage Mode Jiraiya got clobbered by Pain. There was just no chance for him during that fight, right? And what's interesting is that the Sannin, like Jiraiya makes a note. He's like, all right, I'm not gonna evolve as a Sannin. I'm gonna evolve from the Sannin like into his like Sage Mode, which is like it pretty much implies that like all the statements about the Sannin are taken with their base forms and stuff like that, which really just makes Pain more impressive, honestly. And I guess you could say like makes Hiruzen more impressive as well. But realistically, like anything Hiruzen performs, even in the War Arc, like outdoing the 5 Kage, it's like, okay, Is that like outlandish for Pain's lore, you know, being
Right.
above any of the five Kage individually? I think the only one that may be debatable is the fourth Raikage, depending, but I'm on the Pain spectrum for that, so I'll just go on record for that. But you know,
Yeah.
I will say like nothing in Hiruzen's lore, ability wise, stat perspective would just note to him being above like a full power Pain. There's nothing there. Like he has no margin for error, like low chakra supply. He's gonna die from a heart attack mid fight if I'm being honest with you. It's not in it. So I don't think Ome Hiruzen really has too much for Pain.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think there's a lot to discuss here. I mean, he doesn't have the speed, the AP, the defense, or the stamina. So, Old Man Hiruzen unfortunately gets an F. But a hypothetical Prime Hiruzen might be a different story. The way that we're going to gauge Prime Hiruzen, or the way that I gauge him anyway, is based on sort of like his lore in combination with the things that he was able to do during the war arc, since his, aside from, you know, unlimited chakra and regeneration. But since his Edo body sort of gave him an answer for his old man physiology,
Yeah.
that he was able to perform much better during the war arc, and we
Yeah.
got to see what I think is a little bit closer to what his prime would have been. But whenever you include the lore, it raises that bar even more. So what do you think about how he sort of fares in this battle, TG?
So Prime Hiruzen is very interesting because, you know, the strongest Hokage based on reputation, you know, narrative shifts.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch to it. I will say I'm of the opinion that Prime Hiruzen at the bare minimum should be above like peak drama. I don't
Yeah.
think that's a hot take, but I'm of this opinion due to the fact that like his data book talks about him having more latent potential and he lived a much longer life than Tobirama. So he should have realized that potential and grown into a superior shinobi, more comparable to Hashirama, which is what his lore suggests. That's just
Yep.
me. Don't, you know, that's just my opinion on the matter. But I will say he should have a pretty vast arsenal of jutsu. Like, for example, right? What we saw is an Edo Tensei where he's making clones that can match like the pseudo, it's not Hashirama Shinsu Senju, it's not even listed as the same one as the data book, but like the mini version, and he's able to match like all 5 nature releases with his shadow clones. That's something we could see. I could see him also spreading out shadow clones, each just having pretty ridiculous abilities, obviously on his own. He'd obviously have the stamina for it, he'd obviously have the chakra, you know, storages for it. So I could definitely see him having a pretty good approach here, and I don't think Pain himself would be outside the realm for what a Prime Hiruzen could definitely take on. Granted, you know, like, okay, maybe you could say Pain could absorb his jutsu or whatnot, but, you know, I would definitely see him being able to just go around with Enma, just chopping wood, doing all this crazy stuff. Maybe if you see some of the animal summons, if you want to go off the anime version of, like, Obito's assault in the Elite Village, he can, like, push some of them outside the village and, like, send them flying, like Goku's, like, the stick he has, the power pole, like, just to, you know, shoot that out. So, you know, you could have a more prime Enma as well. That's something people don't consider as well. A lot of the feats Enma exhibits aren't from a prime Enma, because Enma would have gotten older as well. So that, you know, Enma who's also compared to Hiruzen, a lore perspective, is like somewhat of an equal. So, you know, he could even argue like he would summon Enma and have Enma go fight some of the paths of pain along with his shadow clone. So he does have some ways to kind of spread himself out and deal with a lot more pain. So I don't think Pain himself is too much. I think the question is, how much damage can he mitigate, kind of in a similar capacity to Tobirama? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and like what we mentioned earlier, you know, so in the war arc, the 4 original Hokage use that Crimson Ray barrier, so they all should have knowledge of how to do that. And you know, while it does say in the data book, I'm pretty sure it says like all the 4 Hokage gather together to do that. Like, it doesn't necessarily say that it has to be 4 separate Hokage level combatants.
Yeah.
And even if it does have to be 4 separate Hokage level combatants, can you really argue that like a Prime Hiruzen shadow clone wouldn't be Hokage level? Like,
yeah,
you know, so I think that it's a possibility. I'm not going to go all the way out there on a limb and say like for sure that Hiruzen could erect a Crimson Ray barrier by himself, but it's definitely a possibility for him to mitigate the damage. Outside of that, though, I don't really think that he has an answer for the amount of just catastrophic damage that's going to be caused from, you know, whether it be the animal summons or the Shinra Tensei. Again, I mean, Pain just has crazy, and we haven't even talked about the Chubaku Tensei. I mean, I don't think in character he would use it, except for like as a last resort kind of thing. But I think that Pain just has so many wide-scale destructive abilities that like Hiruzen would have a tough time keeping all of that damage contained to one area.
I want to, because I agree. I want to add something to the barrier too. because we touched on it. I'm of the opinion, you know, look at it like this. The difference between Hashirama as an Edo and like Hiruzen as an Edo is like night and day, like the older man Hiruzen. Yet Hiruzen still qualifies to make the barrier. So you have to ask yourself, okay, how would like one of Hashirama's wood clones compare to that Hiruzen? It's like, oh, maybe it's not that far off. And something I want to add to the barrier is that it's also a double-edged sword, because it also does hinder the amount of clones that like Hashirama and Tobirama can actually make inside the barrier. So even if they make it, it might just actually end up, you know, while it does contain some of the enemy, it also makes it that, you know, they're not able to just like make all the same amount of clones and go off as well. So I think it's more positive. It's a more of a net positive than a negative, but I do also want to acknowledge there is some negative as well. So, you know, with everything with that, but I do agree generally that even though like Hiruzen should have all this jutsu, it's kind of tough because we don't see it. You know, maybe you could like infer some stuff. You can maybe say like he has some sense of smell comparable to the Inuzuka clan, like, you know, something Kakashi has, and it has all this stuff, but it's kind of tough to give him like, you know, even off this strength wise, like how much damage can he mitigate, because he still does have to go around. And like maybe you argue the paths of pain are distracted, but I think he's really similar to like Tobirama in this case, where he's like objectively above, but it's just like how quickly can he kind of get to like mitigate the damage.
Well, and also, I know that somebody's going to bring up, like, that he knows all of the jutsu in Konoha.
Yeah.
Here's what I want to say. The translation can be taken two different ways, because it says all Konoha ninjutsu, right? So that can mean all of the jutsu that was created in Konoha, or all the jutsu that was, like, a Konoha jutsu. Like, there's a specific... You know what I mean? There's a specific category of jutsu called Konoha jutsu, like the stuff that, like, Genma uses. You know, he uses Konoha jutsu. So if you really want to like highball him, you could say he knows all of the jutsu in Konoha, including the Chidori, including the Rasengan, you know, all these things that he's not listed as a user for.
Yeah.
If you really wanted to lowball him, you could say, and highball him, you could even say like the secret jutsu, like the shadow possession and stuff like that. If you really want to lowball him, you could say, oh, he just knows all of this category of ninjutsu.
Yeah.
I think it's somewhere in between. I cannot see him using the Rasengan, like even if he knows it, or he knows, you know what I mean? Like
it's funny. It's like, dude, there it clearly is painting that he doesn't know it, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like you could make that case, because we just don't know. It's like, you know, so I definitely agree, and that's a good distinction that you made. I'm glad you made that, because there is a range. Like a lot of the Konoha jutsu could be more basic, like basic fire style, basic earth style, you know, nothing too crazy. Or is it like, is he doing like pseudo flying Raijin? Like what do we got? You know what I'm saying? Like there is a distinction to be made.
Well, it's also like, because we've never seen him use those, like what the level would those jutsu be at for him? Because like when Kakashi uses the Rasengan, it's not on the level of like Naruto's, right? So even though he can use it, he never uses it because it's just not like on the level that he would need for it to be like really combat effective. So the same thing could be said for Hiruzen. Like we know that the Hokage guard squad knows how to use the FTG, but they can't use it by themselves. So you could make a legitimate argument that like even if he knows how to use all of them and can use all of them, he just can't use them at a level that's combat effective. So you know, I knew that somebody was just gonna drop that in the comment section, so I just had to touch on that.
No,
quickly,
I had to,
yeah. So other than that, I mean, I think we're on the same page here. Like, what do you think he realistically like does in this fight? Like, how do you think he does in terms of mitigating the damage, and like if at all?
I think he actually might do worse than Tobirama, just due to the fact that he's not going to be able to get across the village as quickly, and like bounce around as more. So I might actually just put him at a strict maybe like C, maybe C to D, just because it's gonna take a lot of time for him to get around and stuff like that, unless you go off the clones or some other stuff. Or you could just maybe say it's a little tougher. I might just stick with him at a C, just because I think Tobirama would do a bit better due to the teleportation. But like it's not like Hiruzen's like, you know, weaker than main or anything like that. It's just like, oh, you know, it might just take him a little longer, that's all.
Yeah, and I personally would like lean, I mean, I think C to D is a good range. I would lean closer to like the D range, just because like I think, again, like you said, he wouldn't be able to get across the battlefield as quickly, so like there would be more damage being done. And of course there are other shinobi in the village helping out, right? Yeah. But like even with up to the point where like the Diva Path fought Kakashi, there were so many different like sections of the village that were just ablaze, you know, and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
being absolutely destroyed, even with the help of all of the other, you know, Konoha shinobi. So him not being able to get across the village quick enough to really help out in a meaningful way before the damage is already kind of done
Yeah.
leads me to believe that like it probably there would probably be a good amount of damage done, even if there's no chaotic Shinra Tensei or anything like
Yeah, yeah.
in the battle. So, yeah, I go with D, but C to D is a good range. I think
Yeah.
we're on the same page there. Now, this next one, since you covered Tobirama, you led the way on Tobirama.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll go ahead and let you lead the way on Minato as well, because I know that we've talked about quite a bit how divisive this has been.
Man, I hate both
you
these
know-
fan bases, bro. I'm playing. I love everybody, but it's just like the thing about Minato, right? Because I gotta start off by saying this. We're taking base Hokage Minato. This is not a matter of if you think Tobirama is faster. I have to clarify that off rip, because that's not essential here. What is essential is the difference in which they use Flying Thunder God, and I have to make that apparent, because Minato bases his whole fighting style around it, whereas Tobirama just has like he's very good with it. Like, he's not a slouch by any means. He replicates some of like the higher stages of what Minato does just by like adding to his variation, but he has a lot more jutsu in his back pocket. Minato bases his fighting style off it. He has a lot more variations defensively. He also has marked kunai, which will allow him to get to pain exponentially quicker. Not because he's faster. I have to clarify this. I'm sorry. I know it's just, but because he literally, like, in character, Minato back pocket throws kunai all over the battlefield. So I would see him, even like when he pulls up in the war arc, he's like dropping kunai everywhere. He's like, you know, teleporting Biju bombs, stuff like that. So it would definitely make sense for him to just like have kunai all over the battlefield, or if he arrives and you say, you know, he just chucks them everywhere and stuff like that. So, and the reason this matters is because it essentially means that he's just gonna be darting over the battlefield at a much faster pace due to having more access to teleportation than Tobirama, not because he's faster. Again, this also means that he'll be able to deal with the animal summons a lot quicker too. I know a lot of people like to say Minato has low stamina or low chakra reserves. That's just not true. That's not true at all.
It's cap, bro. It's cap.
Lies, absolute lies. You didn't read the same fight. You just didn't read like how he was fighting Obito, what he was teleporting. He was teleporting the Nine Tails, these large scale Biju bombs, fighting against Obito. He literally was sealing the Nine Tails and having like a battle with that before he even fought any of that. So it's like he was going through a gauntlet. So, you know, I don't think it's necessarily a matter of that. He also does have sealing jutsu, which would aid him in like sealing potentially any of the animal summons. So I think he actually has one of the better opportunities in this case, just because he's gonna have access. He's gonna be able to dart around a lot more. I'm gonna be able to mitigate a lot of these summons. Like, and I don't mention the animal summons, but he'll just be able to go. You know, people won't bring up that Minato's also a pretty renowned sensory shinobi, so he'll be able to sense around where the paths of pain just are, like where they are in a similar capacity to Tobirama. So I think he would do very well in this discussion. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and another thing too, like to counter the summons, he has his own summons, right? And like, I know I hate like pixel scaling, like people do this all the time, but if you look at how big Gamabunta was in that fight against the Nine Tails versus
he's
like
sitting
how
on
big
it. He's literally sitting
massive.
on it.
He's literally like bigger than the nine, or like at the same size at least of the full Nine Tails. Whereas like later on, you know, he's not anywhere near that size. So like people have made the argument that he's, you know, as he gets older, he gets smaller. And like I don't necessarily agree with that. But like the fact is he does have a contract with the Toad summonings. And so he could do something similar to what Jiraiya did in combating the summonings, even if like you don't want to assume that he just seals them, which I do think he would do, or he could just teleport them away. So the thing with Minato is like, even if you want to argue the lowest end of his speed, it's around Tobirama's level, and then you add the FTG on top of that. That gives him a blitz tier worth of speed above, you know, this version of Pain. So we know that he could blitz him. The question is, could he damage him, right? And I know that there's a data book statement that I've referred to before in previous videos about Naruto's Rasen Shuriken and his fight against Kakuzu. It says something along the lines of he's able to access power that rivals the fourth Hokage's. So like, to me, and to a lot of other people I've spoken to, that sort of implies that Minato's Rasengan is like QB amped Naruto Rasen Shuriken level during the Kakuzu fight. And if that's the case, he's one-tapping all of them except for maybe the Diva Path. What do you think about his AP and sort of like where it
Yeah, so
scales?
I'll touch on this. As far as that statement, I will say, like, I've heard the argument that like the translation has differed, right? So I'll even be minimalistic here. I'll be on like pain defense, just for like the sake of it. Like, even if you didn't give him like AP on that level, right? Even if you did his AP should still be pretty like high, because the paths of pain aren't all equal. It's mainly the Diva path, right? Because
Yeah.
most of the other paths do take damage or get like incapacitated, like the Naraka path. It doesn't get taken out by Konohamaru's Rasengan. Most people get that misconstrued. That Naraka path is fine. It doesn't really take that much damage, and it revives the other paths, but it does get knocked out. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
Minato should have a good effect on all these paths of pain, even if you argue the Diva path may actually be outside his realm of AP, or for actually taking damage. But then it's like, okay, then it's just Minato 1v1ing the Diva path with like an entire village to back him. Like, is that really going to be an issue for him? And I also I also want to add too that we didn't touch on Sage Mode, right? Because that's kind of like an iffy topic. But I will say this, I'm of the opinion it takes him a bit of time to gather the nature energy, but that is something he can do if he ever does want to take a step back and just boost his AP. He literally can just like take a step back, gather nature energy, and then just come in and like one tap pain, like with a Sage R enhanced Rasengan. So even if you're of like a more how can I put this, like a more conservative interpretation about Minato, and you like maybe don't take stuff at like you take it at a certain way, it's still just out of line. Like, even if you say like his speed's like KCM 1 level, okay, that's still kind of implied to be above what like Pain's dealing with, or like right on the nose.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah, like just to kind of be like a little devil's advocate, but I will agree. Like, I do think Minato's like speed and AP should be a tier above.
Well, and the other thing too is like we know that he can make multiple shadow clones.
Yeah.
And we know that he has the speed to blitz pain, and we know that he's able to teleport things as large as the Nine Tails outside of the village. So like, worst case scenario, Minato unironically could just like make 5 clones, blitz all the paths of pain, and teleport them outside of the village, and then fight them there to mitigate the damage in the village. So like, with his intellect, his speed, his AP, his counter to the summons, I mean, just his ability to seal them if necessary. Like, I don't see a way that Pain wins this fight, number one, and number two, does enough damage to the village to like really cause a major issue. But also, there's whenever Naruto talks to Minato in like his like chakra soul realm or whatever during his fight against Pain, Minato seems to imply that like Pain ain't all that, dude. Like, he's like, yeah, this guy's like pretty strong, but like the guy with the mask, he's the one that you got to worry about, and you have to master the Nine Tails power to do. So like, to me, him making that statement and that comparison after beating the version of Obito that he was referring to, seems to imply to me that like he wouldn't have nearly the amount of issues against Pain as he would against Obito. And to be honest, that was a relatively quick fight, despite the fact that he was, still having to deal with the Nine Tails as well.
Yeah, I definitely, that statement actually is divisive for some people. I'm of the interpretation it's pretty self-explanatory. There doesn't really need to be like, he's pretty much just like implying that the Nine Tails chakra is needed to fight Obito, and that he and Obito are somewhat stronger than Pain. So I like, I don't, I'm not of like, I think a lot of people make some weird arguments for Minato, like he's sub Sage Mode Naruto, which is just like, come on, man. Like,
dude, come on.
Let's come on. Like, is this real? So even if you want to be more like conservative, like let's say you want to say Minato's more closer to KCM 1, even if you were more conservative for his scaling, which should also be above Pain at this point, or like on the nose again on that level. So I definitely agree. Minato does have a lot, and something that's interesting to note too is that like, because we were mentioning like Pain's durability and whatnot, but I was actually like looking at this the other day. Like, I'm of the notion that Pain's eyes might not be as durable as his body, as like that might be a case in Naruto, because like even Kakashi, right, when he's like in the fight with Pain, he actually does try to go for Pain's eyes when he like pulls up from the ground, like Pain actually bothers to like repulse him back, which is like, okay, if Pain's durability was that high, why would he even bother like guarding against his eyes? Why wouldn't he have just like slapped like, or just like let Kakashi like tag him? Or why wouldn't he have just like routed Kakashi at that moment? And granted, it's like, why would you let your opponent get in close? But I do think it's interesting to note that like, it's not like One Piece. Like a lot of eyes are vulnerable in Naruto. Like you can just like
Yeah.
So that is something to know too. Like that is a possibility that Pain's eyes might actually be like a little less vulnerable than the rest of his body, which is just that's just human beings as well. But like
Yeah.
not to go off on a tangent. I just think it's interesting to know.
Well, no, something that lends credence to that too is Jiraiya like kicks. I think it's the animal path. Like kicks him in the face and like just destroys his eyes for a second.
Yeah,
like,
they're close. They're close for the entirety of the fight. It's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I do think that there's credence to that, and because Minato's like raw speed and FTG are just they should get. I mean, again, as you said, like at worst KCM 1 Naruto level, and that's like whenever A makes that reference, he's referencing Jonin Minato. So like a Minato that should be weaker than his Hokage counterpart. And then the next reference we get to Naruto and Minato narratively is whenever he comes in KCM 2 and slaps away 6 Bijou bombs.
Yeah.
So like if you really want to go off of like the narrative, like then what we see is that this version of Minato is actually more comparable to KCM 2 Naruto. And then whenever you look at their feats during the war arc, there's actually some credence to that. So I don't think that this version of Minato is anywhere near that Sage Mode Naruto tier. I think he's far above that.
Yeah, I agree.
So he should be able to easily blitz the Paths of Pain. I mean, the Paths of Pain were really having a tough time dealing with even Sage Mode Naruto. So the fact that Minato should be able to blitz them and seal them or, stab their eyes or, whatever, he just has so many different win conditions. And at worst, again, he could just teleport them outside of the village. So I'd say like he probably gets a solid A, like at the very worst, a B plus.
Yeah, I was thinking
like,
B plus. I think B plus is a good range actually. I was gonna say
Gotcha.
that. Yeah, I think B plus is solid.
Sounds good, dude. Okay, so the next one we already saw happen with Tsunade. I love Tsunade. She's one of my favorite characters, easily my favorite female character in the series. But like, she didn't really do anything in this battle aside from like heal people and protect them from the rubble. Like, so I won't give her an F, but she really didn't do anything against Pain. She just sat there and like talked smack to him and then got blown back by a chaotic Shinra Tensei. So I'll give her a D. I mean, what do you think?
Nah, it's bad. It's bad. Like, honestly, like I understand her approach in the battle, like to heal the village, but I'm of the opinion she should have fought. Like, she would have been so much more useful if she had actually engaged Pain directly. I mean, she was going to. That's the thing, too. She was, like, running up. It's like, oh, she's going to do it. And then Pain's like, nah. So, I think D is fine. Like, I mean, she couldn't really... If anything, she might even get an F because she couldn't stop. Like, the whole village got destroyed, to be honest. Like, she pretty much failed the objective. It went into a coma in the process. So, even though she did save a bunch of villagers as well through Katsuyu, it's just like... She didn't really stop anything, and she was very reliant on like everybody else in the village and couldn't really offer like that much support. So I might say like D to F or F.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, we'll give her an F plus or a D minus.
Yeah, it's bad.
Because again, like I'm like, she did do something, but like nothing to really stop what was going on. And if Pain wanted to just wipe out the rest of the villagers, if Naruto wasn't there, he could have. There's nothing that she could have done. So yeah, I think F is good.
Yeah.
As much as I hate to say it, because again, I love Tsunade.
Nah, she's great.
But next up, we have Hokage Kakashi. Now, I know a lot of you have not read the novels.
Shame on you.
But Kakashi's an absolute monster. Yeah, you should. You should definitely read all of them. But even if we just leave out the novel feats and just go with the canon material, Kakashi should still stomp Pain. Like, it shouldn't be close. And I'll break down a few different reasons why, but I'm going to tie in the anime feats and the manga feats, and then sort of reference War Art Kakashi as well. So I know, TG, you and I talked about this. His speed scaling to Kashi and Koji should just blatantly put him above Pain already. What do you think about sort of the anime scaling for him?
So it's interesting because like the thing is, right, people have argued like Kashi and Koji might be suppressed, but he was there to like fulfill an objective. Like he was trying to get a scroll or a certain item, and Kakashi directly prevented that. So it's like, he literally thought that it doesn't matter if you think Kakashi's stronger than Kashi and Koji or not, because I don't even think he necessarily is. But the thing is, Kakashi and Koji thought this was an individual. He's like, all right, this is gonna be like too much trouble to fight. There's gonna be a battle that happens here. There's gonna be an issue. So the fact that Kakashi wasn't someone he could just steamroll, I think is pretty telling on that front.
Yeah. Well, and also like the fact that they were able to swap hands for a brief moment and Kakashi was able to tag him.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, like people will say, oh, it was just a shadow clone. Well, yes and no. That was a shadow clone substitution. Like we've seen this happen before where people will be fighting and then use a shadow clone to substitute out for an attack. So
Yeah.
he was scrapping with Kashi and Koji and he subbed himself out for a shadow clone whenever he got tagged. So like what that tells me is that Kakashi's combat speed should be at least relative to, you know, a base Kashi and Koji, which puts him leagues above what we get from Pain. So
Yeah.
even with just that, Kakashi should unironically just be able to blitz every single one of them without much difficulty, because we also know he can use, you know, the multi-shadow clone jutsu, so he should be able to spread himself, his shadow clones out across the village and take on each and every path of pain, essentially one-shotting them with the Shinden, you know, aside from I guess maybe the Preda path because he can absorb ninjutsu, but like I don't think his reaction speed is fast enough for that.
Yeah.
So with what his purple electricity, the Shinden, has been shown to be able to do, whether it be in the anime, you know, cutting right through Nue, who's like sort of implied to be adult Choji level or above. With it's a weird line of scaling, but essentially like when Kakashi and Sai are talking about taking down Nue, they can't use ninjutsu because he can absorb it, and they're like, we need Choji and the others to show up to help. So it's like Choji, who scales to or probably above at this point Choza, who was stated to be Konoha's greatest war asset. Like it takes Choji to take this thing down.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about UTG, but like I think Choji's probably up there around the Ghetto Mazo at this point. So like that puts him around Bijou level, which is weird. It's a weird line of scaling.
Yeah. The Bijou are a little weird, especially, you know, the war arc also made it a little weirder for the Bijou because they have like you have Datara like slamming them. You know, like body bagging like the three tails with no difficulty. And then when Obito takes control, like they're doing well against the eight tails. So it's like maybe the gap between them just isn't that big, which is a big case. Like the Bijou lineup is actually debated just because a lot of people argue that it's not, the power difference just isn't as big compared to the nine tails, and that a lot of their abilities do make up a lot of the difference. So it is rather interesting to discuss. But no, I definitely agree with like a lot of the Kakashi stuff too. He's just pretty insane off like the anime showings, like you said, like the Chozo and stuff like that. And even like I know like, and then the novel stuff, like it's its own discussion, which obviously I know I want to let you lead on because you know it requires a bit of preface.
That's my boy. You know, so the thing about Kakashi in the novels is first of all, people debate the canonicity. I have no questions about whether or not it's canon, simply because Kishimoto worked as editor on all of them and he illustrated them. So like if he's editing this and he thinks that there's an issue with something in terms of scaling or in terms of lore, he would fix it, right? Like, so these are in line with Kishimoto's thoughts. I'll just start by saying that. So again, even with just the anime scaling, him being able to damage Nue pretty easily, him scaling to Kashi and Koji in terms of like combat speed, like he should be able to take out Pain pretty easily. Whenever you throw in the novel stuff though, not only does his purple lightning get a pretty significant boost, I mean, being able to create thunderstorms with one shot from this thing after being severely fatigued, but also he gets a couple new ninjutsu, one of which is the fire style water mist jutsu that, depending on the translation, so the kanji that is used can be in Japanese can mean either flash or light. It's said that it leaves his hand at the speed of insert kanji. So you could make a legitimate argument that this attack is light speed, which is insane. And this attack specifically was able to counter a water style technique that came from this thing called the Suigu, which is a six paths tool left behind by Hagoromo himself that uses six paths chakra to create enough water to flood an entire country. So like the fact that Kakashi was able to counter this thing like 4 or 5 times with his basic fire style tells me that this fire style is incredibly potent. And honestly, I think it's a good counter for the summons because again, they don't have crazy durability. So he could unironically probably just nuke them with this. But then, you know, you take into account like the statement that that we get in Kakashi Retsuden, where it says his combat abilities have significantly increased from the time he fought Obito and Madara. I don't think anyone can make a legitimate argument that Warwick Kakashi loses against Pain. So, like, what do you think about that? Like, what's your
Now,
interpretation of that statement and how he would scale there?
I agree because you know, he is basically like the statement goes like very pretty much what you said, and like they also supplement it with like his like chakra supply is like magnitudes larger, and what a lot of people don't realize is like this is from him like losing the Sharingan. It did allow this to kind of blossom along with him training up. He didn't have like this constant drain on his chakra just existing, because that's what kind of like the Sharingan was. That's why he has to wear the blindfold, because anytime it's out, it's draining his chakra because he doesn't have the Uchiha biology. So it did kind of allow for this. So I think it's consistent, and him being overall stronger while losing some hacks or some abilities in combat is fine. It's just, you know, it's just he's a different combatant now. That's just all it is. Some things he can't react to as well, probably. But you know, I definitely agree. And Warwick Kakashi would definitely be above the likes of Pain. That's not too questionable. He's also just more comparable to like base Minato. He's like fighting alongside him. It's very implied. Some people say he's QB Minato level. I don't agree with that, but you know, go off what you want. Like
crazy, bro.
Yeah,
that panel's crazy.
Yeah, like really just crazy stuff right there. So I'm not the biggest fan of that, but I think, you know, him being comparable to base Minato's fine in the work. You know, granted, base Minato with the Nine Tails, but still. So you know, he should still objectively be above Pain, like from a stack perspective. And the fact that his purple lightning is so strong means that like any of the paths of Pain are just gonna get one shot essentially. They don't really have like the capability of tanking it down. I mean, even Kakashi was like doing well. I mean, he pretty much chakra fatigued himself to death against the Diva path, but like even like the Diva path, like Pain was like, you're not bad. Like you have a good move set. Like I gotta kill you now before you become an issue. So it's not like, you know, he did horrible against Pain either.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I mean, I think that there's a legitimate argument to be made about who did better against Pain between him and Jiraiya. Obviously, totally different circumstances, but like he was fighting arguably the two strongest paths, and you know, Jiraiya fought arguably the three weakest until they all kind of like just jumped him, you know. So based on the fact that in the war arc he's far stronger than he is at that point in time, and then this statement gets him like clear above where he was at that point in time. And then also there's this one feat in terms of mitigating damage, like, so if you want to assume that it takes a little bit of time for him to sort of get where he needs to go, even though he's, you know, Kashi and Koji level in terms of speed, who scales to Delta, who scales to Press 6 past Sage with Naruto, do with that what you want. If he wants to it's a weird line of scaling, I'll admit. If he wants to mitigate the damage, though, in the Kakashi Retsuden novel, he erects a mud wall around an entire village and then maintains it for anywhere between 12 and 24 hours. So like the first statement about it is that he's had it up for over half a day, and then the second statement about it, the prime minister, the dude with the six paths tool, says, aren't you out of chakra? You sustained that mud wall for like almost a day. So like somewhere between 12 and 24 hours he sustained this mud wall. Not only did he do that, but he also was repairing it and changing its properties multiple times because it was being attacked by not only ninjutsu but also like cannonballs. So he's just got crazy stamina, and this wall should be able to at least contain them to some degree. I'm not positive it would survive a chaotic Shinra Tensei, but I don't think that the fight would go that far because Kakashi has a massive speed advantage. He's got crazy intellect, his AP is insane, and again, his chakra levels are just out of this world. So for me, Kakashi gets an A because I think he takes down the Paths of Pain relatively quickly, and if he needs to mitigate damage, he can with that, you know, village-sized mud wall.
Yeah, he arguably scales like to the higher end of the Hokage threshold. Like I see, you know, you could make a decent case for him being above the likes of Hashirama. That's not even that crazy when you like look at the stuff. So kind of looking like that, like A is just very A's fine. Like he's and he has like a wide range of abilities, a lot of ways to mitigate damage. He shouldn't really have too many problems with the summons and stuff like that. He just has a lot of what the other Hokage have, which is better stats, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Actually, in my Hokage ranked video, which I'll put up there at the top right for you guys, I have him at 3, but behind Naruto and Hashirama. But like, again, you can make a legitimate argument for him above Hashirama. It's just like, I want to see more from him before we get him there. But he's at least in that same tier though, for sure. But yeah, so Kakashi gets an A, and you know, I don't think that Hokage Naruto really needs any deliberation at all. I mean, he literally blitzes all of them and one taps them before they can react. Do you have anything to add there? Or
Nah,
do you
I
sort of
mean,
move on?
like, I think his shadow clone does the same. It's like it's not really anything to talk about. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just yeah.
yeah, it's not close. So Hokage Naruto gets an A plus, and then Shikamaru. Now this one's going to be contentious because for some reason this has been split right down the middle in the community, and I don't know why. Anybody that has read the novels should know that Shikamaru isn't even tree level in terms of AP. And like, I'm not dunking on him right now. I'm just saying the facts.
Yeah.
So TG, you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So there's a statement, and I've been guilty of it, so I'll put myself on the chopping block. But like where he restrains the other Kage. When they're in that meeting, pretty much everybody has heard this. They get out of line. He pretty much is able to like suppress their movements and whatnot. Aside from Naruto, which like they talk about, like, would it be really possible because of the QB and whatnot. So it's like he does this really good feat, right? And then like it would be all great and dandy because he also has good feats, and like we'll talk about the Boruto anime in a second. But the problem with this feat is like it's followed out by such an egregious anti feat. Yeah. Go ahead and explain this. I know you have a good
Bro.
wait, yeah.
So he has this whole like I'm him big dog moment, where he allegedly restrains the Hokage, or the 4 of the 5 Kage, not the Hokage. Naruto has no issue with it. And then he's walking home after a long, frustrating day at work, and so he wants to take his frustration out on a tree. So he uses his Shadow Strangle and goes to break it in half, and the dude can't even splinter it. So here's the thing. I love Shikamaru, especially in like part 1. He was one of my favorite characters. His fight against Tamari is like a top 3 Chunin exams fight for me.
W.
I love Shikamaru, but he cannot harm any of these paths of pain unless you want to argue that they are tree level, which would be so disingenuous. Like, he just can't harm them. He even has like a bit of a dialogue with himself after this, where he sort of realizes that the Hokage, or that the I keep saying the Hokage, that the Kage, the other 4 Kage,
The Gokage,
were sort of being nice in a way, like that they probably could have gotten out of there. And he even mentions that like he hasn't used it in combat in forever. So like, this is just a rusty Shikamaru. So the fact that he's weaker than what he was during the war arc, or even beginning of Shippuden, like, it makes sense. Now, I will say, his physical stats have made a massive jump just because of the power creep. Do you want to talk about sort of his stuff in the Boruto anime?
Yeah, so like he has some good like shadow possession feats. Like he can restrain the likes of Kinshiki, which is a much better feat than any of the novel stuff. Which again, like I again, it's like a good like suppression feat, but he still isn't able to like take down Kinshiki. So it's kind of difficult what you can draw off that. Maybe you could say like, okay, be able to restrain the paths of pain, which I think is fine because Kinshiki's like a league above them, like 10 leagues above them in terms of like physical might, chakra supply, all of that. So I think that's fair. He probably would have shadow strangled them if he could have, but he didn't. Now, he also has some good feats in the manga. Like he's able to dodge a kick from Delta, which is pretty impressive. The same Delta was just scrapping with Naruto and whatnot. So his combat stats and like shadow possession, like the anime and manga, are pretty good. But you know, while that's all great, that's more like 1v1 stuff. It doesn't really prevent pain from like blowing up the village with like summons and like interrogating everybody. Like the best Shikamaru could do is like run around and try and interrogate like a single path to pain. Like he's gonna the minute he leaves, they're just gonna keep going, or he has to try and like win like 1v1 against like the paths of pain with like help, which might be possible, but again, it doesn't really solve anything because like he has to kind of choose correctly, because if he can't, the Naraka and Animal Path can like dip out and reverse summon the other paths that are all over the battlefield and just revive them and come back. So it's like, okay, that approach doesn't work. We already saw that in the Tsunade fight. So it doesn't really help the village at all, to be honest with you. Like it really doesn't.
Yeah, I think that the best argument that could be made would be maybe he restrains that. And again, you made this point before we hopped on here. He has to get them all 6 together, like, and they arrive to the battlefield split up into different groups. So like, he would have to find a way to get all of them together for this to even matter. But if you just want to say, like, for whatever reason, the 3 of them are just wreaking havoc, and then they decide to join the other 3, and then Shikamaru just happens to be there, even if he gets all 6 of them in the shadow possession, like, there's no guarantee, like we said, that he could harm them. So best case scenario is that, some other shinobi show up and steal them. But, like, I don't even think that that matters, because at that point in time, the village would be gone. Like,
Yeah.
there's no reason for them to even group up until Naruto gets there. And so, like, you'd have to assume that for some reason they considered Shikamaru a threat that was on par with Naruto, and, like, I just don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love Shikamaru, but he low key gets like an F minus, because, like, the village gets destroyed and he dies.
Yeah, he just like it isn't a matter of strength. He just like doesn't have like the arsenal or ability to like spread himself that thin. Even if you do think he could take Pain 1v1, it's not like unless even if he does like it's not like he's gonna do like a village wide like shadow possession. Like even if he does something
Yeah,
similar to Shikadai, so he should honestly like get an F in this situation. He just doesn't have the ability to stop anything. It's like even if he does take out some paths of pain, the pains can reverse some and just like regen themselves and stuff like that. And it's like he's not gonna be able to stop chaotic Shinra Tensei. He just doesn't really have
yeah.
anything. It's not a matter of like, oh, he's this fast. Like no, that's not a question.
Yeah. Well, and if he's even if he's fully restrained, like, there's not really a solid argument to be made that Pain can't use the chaotic Shinra Tensei or even the Bancho Tenin. So I don't know,
Momoshiki
man.
literally absorbs his jutsu while being restrained. So maybe you can even argue
Right.
like the Asura Path might be able to do something in that capacity. But then again, like that was kind of on his palm, so maybe it's not a 1-to-1, but just to note.
Yeah, but, like, my thing is, no, 100%. Like, well, whenever the Preta Path, like, does absorb ninjutsu, it's like a bubble that forms around him, kind of. So, like, it's like a semicircle, really, because he can still take attacks from above. But, like, you can make an argument that it doesn't have to be right in front of him for him to do that. Like, he could probably still, well, he could plausibly still absorb the ninjutsu. So yeah, I just don't think Shikamaru has a chance. I don't know why this has been such a divisive sort of like conversation in the community about whether or not because people have him as like the strongest Hokage aside from Naruto. I'm like, this is just ridiculous. But
Yeah.
well, to review, Hashirama, I think, gets an A for being able to just like minimize casualties and take down Pain.
Yeah.
Tobirama, he gets somewhere between a B and a D, just depending on sort of your interpretation of how quickly he can take him down. Old Man Hiruzen definitely gets an F. Prime Hiruzen, probably closer to like that C to D range. And then we have Minato. I think he gets either an A or a B, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Because he probably can't minimize the damage the same way that like Hashirama can, but he can definitely take down Pain pretty quickly. And then as far as we have Tsunade. Tsunade gets an F because she got an F in real life. Or, well, not in real life, but in the original storyline.
Yeah.
And then Kakashi, I think that he definitely gets an A. Naruto gets an A, and then Shikamaru gets an F. I think that we covered that pretty well. I mean, do you have any points to add there, or sort of closing thoughts here, TG?
No, I mean, honestly, like the main thing I would say for people to acknowledge that this is kind of like a mix of like strength plus arsenal. It's not simply like A character is stronger than B character, which means they do better. Now, that's not the case. Like, I definitely think there is a part to play with like these characters and like what they have up their sleeve, like how their approach is to these types of situations, because Hokage do all have different avenues, but some we try to be more generous with and just offer some different interpretations. But I'm definitely curious to see like what people say, so definitely leave like what you kind of have your rankings as down below in the description. We definitely want to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys have been living under a rock and you're not sub to TG, make sure to head over to his page and give him a sub. He makes some of the best content, if not the best content, in the Naruto community right now. So yeah, go ahead and give him a sub, follow along. Yeah, man. And thank you for coming on the channel, bro. I look forward to many, many more incredible videos with you, bro.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end.